Clara Ellison, itinerant embroidery tutor and unapologetic railway enthusiast, stepped on to Platform 2 at London Victoria, with the particular thrill that only the British Pullman could summon. The polished umber and cream carriages gleamed beneath iron arches. Porters hurried past with brass-handled trunks, and from somewhere down the rake, a kitchen range released the buttery promise of croissants. Clara drew the lapels of her moss-green coat together and joined the short queue for car eglantine. Miss Ellison, a steward in dove-grey livery, asked, checking a tablet balanced over his silver tray. Seat 3A, facing forward. Welcome aboard the Golden Swallow luncheon service to Canterbury. Inside, the carriage was an Art Deco jewel box done in walnut marquetry and plush armchairs. Each seat wore a removable cream cotton cover that buttoned above the headrest. Clara stroked the neat satin stitch initials, GS, thinking how well the Pullman upheld its traditions. Then, as she set her knitting bag on the luggage rack, a thread snagged on the underside of the cover. She tipped it forward to free the wool and froze. On the hidden surface, someone had embroidered a tiny scene in thistledown silk. A table on wheels stood in a railway corridor, a teapot tilting, amber liquid pouring across parquet. Above it, 3 curving lines suggested steam or alarm. It was exquisite, no larger than a playing card, yet bursting with detail. "That's odd," Clara murmured. The headrest would normally hug the polished wood. No passenger was meant to see its reverse. Why embellish what lay concealed? The guard's whistle shrilled. She righted the cover, stored the curiosity for later thought, and settled into her seat. To her left sat Lady Penelope Harrington, a blue-rince dowager whose collection of brooches could sponsor a small library. Across the aisle, travel writer Martin Dove adjusted the brim of his trilby, pen already dancing in a notebook. Farther down, Mrs. Barlow, a retired chemist with merry brown eyes, studied the wine list while her husband wandered off toward the bar car. All ordinary enough, yet that hidden embroidery itched at Clara's mind like an unanswered letter. The train eased out of Victoria, gas lamps flickering as they entered Grosvenor Bridge tunnel. Within minutes, a steward glided in, with crystal flutes of elderflower fizz. He had barely turned when the squeal of a service trolley rang down the corridor, followed by an almighty splash. Clara and several others craned their heads. A second steward hurried past, shoes skidding on wet parquet, calling for cloths. When he returned, breathless, brandishing a dripping teapot, Clara's pulse skipped. The scene was exactly as pictured in the hidden embroidery. Trolley, teapot, amber puddle, even the fluting steam lines. "A small bump in the track, madam," he apologized to Lady Penelope. "No injuries, only a lost pot of Darjeeling." Clara pressed her fingertips together. Coincidence? Possible, certainly. But the detail felt uncomfortably perfect. Curious, she unbuttoned her own headrest cover, pretending to seek better lumbar support, and peeked inside. There, behind the graceful GS, was another miniature tableau, a diamond-shaped brooch lying on what looked like the mosaic floor of a lavatory, while an arm reached from the corner clutching a red scarf. Clara inhaled. Lady Penelope wore a diamond-shaped brooch, a Fabergé snowflake heavy with icy brilliance. Was the embroidery predicting that the brooch would fall? No, be stolen, mid-journey. And what did the red scarf signify? Embroiderers seldom stitched at random. Motifs were language. Someone aboard was speaking through thread, and the carriage was their gallery. She turned to her neighbour. "Lady Penelope, forgive my impertinence, but might I suggest you fasten that pin more securely? The train sways more than one expects." The dowager chuckled. "Oh, I'm not so dotty as to lose my jewels, Miss Ellison. I teach needlework." Clara chose the title deliberately. It often prized open confidences. I couldn't help admiring the piece. "Yes, rather fine, isn't it? My late husband's parting love token." She patted it, unconcerned, and returned to her magazine. At Witton Junction, the locomotive gained stride, countryside fanning into coppery fields. Lunch, lobster bisque followed by guinea fowl, was served on starched linen. Between courses, Clara excused herself and walked the carriage, feigning to admire marquetry panels while actually checking headrests. Some remained plain. Others, subtly inverted, hid more scenes. A man choking amid gouts of smoke, a leather attaché case left on a station bench, a silhouette framed by cathedral spires. Whatever was coming, it would not be confined to spilled tea. She found Gregory Vale, chief conductor, in the vestibule, clicking pocket watch against timetable. Vale knew her from previous journeys. They shared a fondness for railwayana auctions. "Gregory," she whispered, "someone's embroidering messages on your headrests." He blinked. "I beg your pardon?" "Look." She turned the nearest cover to reveal a silk depiction of Canterbury West Station, a figure falling against a pillar clock that read 1:30. Predictive scenes, first already came true, the tea incident. That could have been chance. Clara lifted an eyebrow. Chance with the correct teapot pattern? Vale studied the stitches, jaw tightening. "If this is mischief, it's elaborately planned. Do you suspect sabotage?" "I suspect a crime yet to happen. Possibly theft, maybe worse." "Passengers?" She lowered her voice. "Martin Dove is an ex-textile designer. He wrote Threaded Destinations. He certainly has the skill. And Lady Penelope's brooch is flashing like a lighthouse." Vale exhaled. "I'll warn security at Canterbury. Meanwhile, keep eyes open. Discretion, Miss Ellison." He replaced the cover. Clara returned to her seat, brain whirring. A cosy mystery on rails, except real lives, real consequences. She retrieved her own sewing kit and a scrap of linen, thinking better with needle in hand. And as the train rattled through Tonbridge, she stitched her observations. Brooch, red scarf, 1:30. Martin Dove strolled by, pausing. "You capture the atmosphere beautifully, Miss Ellison." She looked up. His suit was tasteful charcoal, but a corner of crimson silk peeped from his breast pocket. Red scarf? Or simply a pocket square? Clara forced a smile. First-class views deserve first-class souvenirs. Indeed. His eyes lingered on her hurried, coded lettering. "What are those initials?" "Merely a mnemonic." She kept her voice light. When he moved on, Lady Penelope leaned across, whispering, "Charming fellow, though a touch nosy. Offered to photograph my brooch for his travelogue." I declined. One mustn't be careless. A rumble overhead signalled the approach of Chatham tunnels. Lights flickered. In the sudden half-dark, the aroma of cigar smoke drifted in, not the sweet occasional hint permissible in the bar car, but a thick, lung-prickling cloud. Passengers coughed. The train jolted. Emergency lighting blinked amber. Vale's voice crackled over the intercom. "Apologies, ladies and gentlemen. Minor ventilation fault. Please remain seated." Clara clutched the armrests. Minor fault, or second embroidery scene. Smoke, man choking. She scanned for the red scarf. A steward fanned air at the carriage door. Martin Dove was nowhere visible. Moments later, the ventilation resumed, sucking smoke upward. Calm settled like dust after harvest, but whispers grew. Lady Penelope reached for her reticule with trembling gloves. Perhaps Dove had staged the smoke to create confusion, the perfect cover to snatch a brooch. Yet when Vale escorted maintenance engineers through, Lady Penelope's jewels still sparkled undisturbed. "Good heavens," she muttered, "all this fuss for a puff of smoke." Clara wasn't convinced. Embroidery foretold smoke and someone choking. Maybe the crisis had been a rehearsal, or the true victim lay elsewhere. She excused herself to visit the lavatory, scene of the predicted brooch drop. Within the tiny mosaic-floored compartment, she found nothing amiss. Towels folded, rose soap perfuming the air, bin empty. But as she turned, her reflection faltered. The small mirror's silvering bore a thumbprint swirl, recent, damp. Someone had been here. Back in Eglantine, dessert arrived, warm apple tart. Martin Dove reappeared, clearing his throat theatrically. "Apologies, ladies and gents. I indulged a Capstan cig in the bar. Seems the extractor balked." He removed the crimson pocket square to dab his brow. Red fabric. Clara's stare must have lingered because he winked. "You disapprove, Miss Ellison?" he teased. "I dislike smoke in confined spaces," she replied, which was true, though not the half of it. As the train slowed past Whitstable's seaside cottages, Clara's seatmate drifted to the observation vestibule for photographs. The moment Lady Penelope left, Dove rose too, offering to carry her shawl. Clara followed at a discreet distance. She reached the vestibule as sea air surged through open windows. Lady Penelope leaned over the brass rail, adjusting her hat. Dove, standing behind, surveyed the coastline. His hands appeared empty. Clara exhaled, false alarm. But then he stepped aside and something glittered on the floor. The brooch. Clara swooped before Lady Penelope turned. "Temperamental clasp," she improvised, pinning it back with sure fingers. "Best to tighten." "Bless you, dear," Lady Penelope said, none the wiser. Dove watched, expression unreadable. "How fortunate Miss Ellison is always nearby." Clara met his gaze. "Fortune favours the vigilant." He slipped the red silk square into his breast pocket and departed. So, Dove had attempted the theft, but abandoned it when Clara appeared. Why tip the jewel onto the floor instead of pocketing it? Because he needed Lady Penelope to believe it was still secure until the real snatch, likely timed for 1:30 at Canterbury West, per the embroidery. She glanced at her wristwatch. 12:55. An hour left. Clara sought Mrs. Parler, finding her in the bar car puzzling over a cryptic crossword. "Mrs. Parler, I need a scientific brain." Clara relayed the embroidery scheme in hushed tones. The chemist brightened, intrigue sparkling. Predictive art? Delightful. Could be a warning or a boast. Or both. The crucial detail is the red scarf. Dove has one. "Ah, but so do I." Mrs. Parler opened her handbag to reveal a rolled pashmina. "And there's a theatrical gentleman in Car Alberta sporting scarlet socks." She tapped her pen on the crossword grid. "Colour alone isn't proof." Clara sighed. But Dove had motive. Travel pieces sell bigger with a criminal hook. Imagine exclusive photos of stolen jewels, daring detective work. He'd be first on the scene because he orchestrated it. Mrs. Parler pursed her lips. "Then we must out-orchestrate him. Let's look again at your stitch code. Figure falling against Canterbury station clock. How might one create a dramatic fainting episode?" "A faint would draw attention away from the real theft," Clara mused. "Smoke or sudden fumes?" Mrs. Parler's eyes twinkled. "I kept some ammonium carbonate smelling salts in my bag. Theatre actors use them for quick collapses and revival. In the wrong hands." She trailed off. They traded a meaningful glance. The guard announced crossing the Stour marshes. Canterbury approached. Clara returned to her carriage, heart thrumming like the locomotive. She found Gregory Vale whispering with 2 British Transport police officers who had boarded at Faversham. He nodded as Clara handed him a quickly penned note. Watch Dove at 1:30. She also slipped him her earlier scrap of stitched linen. The tangible evidence helped. Vale tucked it in his jacket. We'll position plain clothes in the vestibule. 12:58. If Dove suspected a trap, he might accelerate his plan. Better to secure Penelope's jewel now. Clara needed a distraction that would force Dove's hand prematurely. She thought of the first embroidery, the trolley and tea. The saboteur liked accidents. Well, 2 could play. She approached the steward preparing coffee in the service nook. May I borrow the cream jug, the silver one? He looked unsure, but recognized her from many journeys. Of course, madam. She fetched her own portable needlework iron from her tote, small enough to heat beadwork, and placed it beside the jug under a folded napkin, the cable discreet beneath the seat. A warm jug would develop condensation, a slick handle. Not dangerous, merely unpredictable. Then she waited. 12:59, 1. The steward emerged balancing cups on a tray. As he passed Dove's seat, the milk jug slid, tipping white arcs over Dove's notebook. Oh, dash it! Dove leapt up, knocking his chair. Every head turned. Clara sprang into the aisle. So clumsy of me, she exclaimed, taking responsibility. While passengers fussed and the steward apologized, Clara's peripheral vision caught something else. Dove's left hand slipping into his jacket, then back out. Empty. Lady Penelope's brooch was gone. Dove produced a handkerchief, this one plain linen, to dab at the spill. His red silk pocket square, she noticed, had vanished too, probably cocooning the jewel. Clever. He would blend into the disembarkation crowd, hand off the brooch to an accomplice at the platform. Time to tighten the net. Clara retreated to Vale and whispered, He's taken it, red cloth, likely oozes via rear vestibule upon arrival. Vale murmured into his radio, 1:12. The train glided beneath Canterbury's medieval walls, brakes sighing, spires pierced the pale sky, exactly as one embroidered panel had shown. Passengers gathered belongings. Lady Penelope donned gloves, oblivious that her collar was now empty. Clara blocked the aisle. Lady Penelope, forgive me, but your brooch! The dowager gasped, clutching at her lapel. Gone? But how? There's still time, Clara said. Let the conductor search. Vale strode in. Ladies and gentlemen, slight delay. Remain seated while we resolve a security matter. Murmurs rose, but English politeness prevailed. Dove stood, feigning curiosity. What's happened? The Fabergé brooch, Clara said levelly, was removed from Lady Penelope's person moments ago. We will examine all luggage before detrainment. Dove's eyes flickered, yet he smiled. Shocking, by all means. He knew that a body search required probable cause the police did not yet have. He would surrender luggage, which likely held nothing. The jewel was on him or already planted elsewhere. The 2 transport officers appeared. Sir, step this way. As they frisked him, Clara scanned his pockets. Wallet, pen, tickets, but no crimson square. He hadn't had time to hide it elsewhere, or had he? The embroidery also showed a figure falling against the station clock. That fall had not yet transpired. Dove might intend to feign a collapse outside, smuggle the jewel in his scarf to an accomplice, while attention focused on his well-being. Check his handkerchief, Clara urged. One officer unfolded the linen square, only milk stains. Then Dove coughed theatrically, swayed. I feel peculiar. His knees buckled. Mrs. Parler, arriving behind, produced her smelling salts. Step aside. She cracked the capsule beneath his nose. Dove gagged at the pungency and jerked upright, just as something fell from his sleeve, a small roll of silk, red, clinking softly. Vale snatched it, unwrapping to reveal the snowflake brooch sparkling amid satin folds. Cheers erupted. Lady Penelope fluttered her hands in gratitude. The officers cuffed Dove, who protested but wilted under evidence. Clara exhaled, shoulders easing. Yet a niggle remained. Who had embroidered the prophetic scenes? Dove might possess skills, but with his hands full of larceny and smoke machines, would he have had time to stitch dozens of miniatures across an entire carriage? She touched one final headrest near the vestibule. Hadn't noticed it before. Inside, instead of silk, a paper tag was tacked. Thank you for noticing. Purpose served. A figure of a woman wearing spectacles was sketched in pen beside the words, holding needle and thread. Clara's breath caught. She turned to see Mrs. Parler tucking something into her handbag, an embroidery hoop. You, Clara whispered. Mrs. Parler shrugged, smiling. Retirement is dull. I was once in research and development, you know, predictive modelling. Patterns fascinate me. When I booked this outing, I caught Dove boasting on a podcast about the perfect on-board scoop. I suspected skullduggery, so I stitched probability maps as warnings in plain sight. You saw them, acted. Success. Aren't we a pair? Clara said, half in awe. Why not just inform the police? Without evidence, they'd have dismissed an old lady's hunch. Embroidery gave tangible breadcrumbs. She squeezed Clara's arm. But I needed a sharp needle to notice. Thank you. The platform inspector signalled all clear. Passengers finally disembarked, scandal and adventure colouring their faces. Lady Penelope bestowed Clara with a kiss on each cheek and promised to fund a scholarship for textile arts. Outside, autumn sun gilded cathedral stone. Vale joined Clara and Mrs. Parler beside the locomotive, where steam drifted like epilogue smoke. British Pullman thanks its resident detectives, he said, doffing cap. Might we tempt you ladies for the return leg? Mrs. Parler chuckled. Only if we're upgraded to the kitchen car. My predictive talents could extend to soufflés. Clara smiled, eyes on the empty rails stretching homeward. Mystery, like embroidery, was a series of interlocking threads. Follow them true, and the pattern resolved. She slipped her hand through the crook of Mrs. Parler's arm. Come along, partner. There's always another design waiting to be stitched. Together, they boarded the sparkling carriage, ready for the next motif life might embroider on the hidden side of the journey.